Three, two, one. Okay, we are live. Welcome, guys. We are here for day two with the Fred Hampton leftists. We have a special guest with us today. This is the primary day you will see my good friend RJ with us hosting some good content. So I will hand it over from here to him. How you doing today, RJ?
I am doing splendid today. It's great in Michigan, nice and sunny. Still a little chilly, but I'm doing all right. Everyone, this is the RJ Show. This time at 4 p.m. every day, I'll be doing interviews with a lot of special guests to talk about what they're doing, what some problems they see in their area, and to talk about their experiences as well as policies they may be advocates for. And today we have a special guest today. We have Renee Johnson, a queen herself, someone who is a part of MPP and has great experiences with grassroots organizing, activism, and engaging in black voter turnout. So welcome, Renee.
Thanks, RJ. How you doing?
I am doing great. So I guess we can get started. So my first question with you is, how did your involvement begin with MPP, and was it everything you initially envisioned it would be?
So, and you and I go back a few months now, chit chatting about all the things that have gone well and gone wrong. I initially discovered MPP through the convention that they held last summer online. I was very excited to see an opportunity to change the forefront of politics to include something outside of the duopoly, to give people a voice beyond the Democrats and the Republicans. Um, I really enjoyed some of the speakers that participated. Amaya Washengi, who spoke, and she's one of the youth leaders for MPP, is, she's a high school student. I'm a grown person, so I hesitate to say friends, but we have we have worked together in another organization previously. So I had gotten to know her fairly well, and it was a great, in my head, an opportunity to do something outside of just working with Democrats, which apparently we're a monolith and all black people vote for Democrats, and that's just how it works. And I was really excited about the possibility of doing something different. Um, I immediately signed up at the end of the convention. And started to go through the process of joining a couple of the working groups, of trying to figure out the organization in New York. I am a New York resident. I live in Brooklyn, born and raised in Brooklyn. Have actually lived in a couple other places, but I'm back in Brooklyn now. And started to work at starting the New York Hub, which had not started prior to my joining. They had a number of people listed in the system who were residents of New York, but they had not actually started any organizing in New York. There were some questions about whether or not it was going to be doable because the state is so large, and because most people, when they think of New York, they think of New York City, and they forget there's an entire state outside of New York City. So, there was a lot of trying to figure out how to manage that part of the organizing to get people involved both in New York City and outside of New York City. And we started that process. We were doing weekly calls, trying to organize to figure out how to get people more involved with things. There were a number of questions and issues that came up along the way that made it pretty clear that they did not have a real plan for New York, a real plan for ballot access in New York, a real plan for organizing in New York. And it was becoming kind of a circle. We would meet and we would have the same questions regarding, okay, well, what are we going to do next? What's the next step? What's going to happen with the mayoral races? What's going to happen with all these seats that are coming up for, in New York City? This is a big voter year because all of the borough president seats are up and the mayoral seat is up. And then the governor's race is in 2022. And in New York, we are not a gather signature state to get ballot access. You actually have to run someone for governor, and that person has to get at least 2% or 130,000 votes, and then you can call yourself a party and you can have ballot access in the state. Once that was understood, the question started to become, okay, so what is MPP's plan for 2022 in order to make sure that the ballot access can be gained in 2024? It became painfully clear that there wasn't really a plan for that to happen. And that's when things really started to get fairly problematic on my end, at least, as far as trying to manage the expectations of all the people who are coming to these weekly meetings. And it's tricky because you're trying to get people engaged. You're trying to get people to want to do something, to want to be involved. And, essentially what happens when they're asking reasonable questions like, okay, so what's going to happen next? If you don't have an answer, then people start to question, well, what exactly are we doing? What's the point of what we're doing? And, you start really spinning in circles about what the opportunities really are. We decided as a state to not worry about the ballot access, to not get stressed out about the National People's Party, and to just kind of move forward with organizing separately. We were going to start meeting with other organizations regarding, different types of actions. There's a lot of stuff going on in New York with regard to the ballot access. The state is being sued by the Green Party, by the Sand Party, because of what happened with the changes with the ballot access. So we were looking at that. Ranked choice voting is going to happen for the first time within New York City. So we were talking about trying to find ways to be of assistance with that. There's a huge homelessness problem that really came to a forefront during COVID, and with trying to find placement for homeless people in the city. So there were all these opportunities to actually have some, role in actively being involved in things that were going to have, make a difference within New York itself. And that was kind of what we had decided we were going to do. We were going to focus on New York. We were going to focus on New York politics. We were going to focus on New York actions. And then, we were going to just move forward. And whenever National kind of figured out what they wanted to do, then we would participate in that. We made that decision, and probably like 3 days later, I woke up and I didn't have access anymore. So
Right.
that was the end of that.
And what I will say is that my first encounter, I guess, with MPP was really early on before the convention. And I guess like some of the concerns I had too was that it wasn't necessarily organized as well and as structured as everyone initially thought. Because when the MPP convention came out, you had all the different lefty stars. You would think that this is a broadcast. Everything is in place. We have our potential nominees ready. We have all the circles ready. We have everything we need. So when we have an influx of people, you're putting it in a structural system for success. And I feel like, just talking to some other activists, when you have such it's kind of harsh to say dysfunctional, but not really a good structure in terms of leadership and in terms of organization, it makes it very difficult for the activists and the organizers to go to voters, to put out MPP, to actually organize statewide, and to actually file as a state party in certain states. So I guess my question to you is, what are some of the main concerns from MPP voters, and how did those concerns affect your voter drives? And overall, too, how did you feel about the convention happening before those before those structural changes were be put in place, versus it being after that? So what is your opinion on that?
So because I got involved right after the convention and as a result of the convention, I honestly had no idea that they were not together, that they didn't have all these things. Oh, what just happened? My connection just cut. This is not good.
Oh, you're fine. We can still hear you.
It's all good. Yeah, we can
hear you. Oh, you can hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Sorry. So my, what I discovered was, sorry that it got thrown off.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
So I didn't realize that they weren't together at all. So what I understood was that they used to be Draft Bernie, and that they had been in existence as an organization for, going on 3 years. So joining, I actually anticipated that the things that ended up becoming a problem were not going to be problems. I was not expecting that, working groups would not be organized. I was not expecting, honestly, I was frankly shocked that New York did not have a hub, not to be the narcissistic New Yorker, but, I always, there's some states that in my mind, and having been in multiple places around the country and having lived in different places around the country, um, New York is a fairly active state. It's a large state, and it's a state where people are paying attention to what the politics are coming out of the state. So when I joined,
You're muted. Your audio just cut out.
Yeah, just unmute yourself. I think we'd be fine.
sorry, there we go.
There we go.
To discover that, they didn't have a setup in the state of New York, I was really surprised by that. Um, and then as we went to discover that they just didn't have a whole lot of things put in place that I would have expected to have been in place, upon joining, given that they did this entire convention and that, they were trying to pull all of these people in to volunteer and to participate and to have a role. I really expected for things to be more in place and to be set up and to be ready to go versus for them to still be really in their inaugural steps as an organization. It's one thing if they formed in 2019 to still be having some of these things be an issue, but for them to have formed in 2017 and at the end of 2020 to still not have bylaws, to still not have, for people to be begging for information about who's running what working groups, to be asking questions about ballot access because they were still in the research process. I mean, when they would draft Bernie, the plan was to run Bernie for president. So,
Right.
to me, since that was always your plan, it's not like they started out doing something else. They always started out with the intention of being a political party and to have a voice in the political structure. So I couldn't understand why they didn't have answers to these questions. And when I would say, what exactly are you all doing about the ballot access? The answer would be, oh, well, we're meeting and we're talking to attorneys. And I remember thinking to myself one time, how is it that you're just starting this process? Like, how is it 2020 and you don't have answers to these questions? And it was disheartening, honestly. And when the petition was written and I read it, it seemed to me that the majority of the asks in the petition were things that they should have had before they did the convention. They were things that should have been in place before they did this major thing where they were going to bring all these people in, because they were not prepared for the response that they got from doing from doing that convention and from really getting people so excited. And then it really lost its teeth because they just weren't ready. I had access to Action Network. I had signed the NDA. There were 7,500 and something people in Action Network as New York residents who were waiting to be contacted to volunteer. That's a lot of people to be waiting, since 2000. And some of those emails had gone in like 2019 and had never been contacted for anything. And now it's, end of 2020. And I would say, well, I don't want to call people when I don't know what I'm telling them. Like, it's not like we're a committee. We don't have legal standing. You don't have a plan. We're not running anybody because you don't want us to run anybody locally, but you don't really know what you're doing for governor yet. What am I calling people to tell them? What am I emailing people to tell them? And there wasn't really an answer. And then we were asking for, okay, well, we can at least email people and say we're starting to, do local actions, but we need an email address, because I'm not going to send an email from my personal Gmail to somebody saying I'm representing the People's Party. Like, there should be a New York at People's Party email address.
Right.
And,
correct.
We were asking for that for weeks before I got booted out. And I actually don't think they ever created it. I still don't think there's a New York People's Party email address.
So it seems
it just didn't happen.
So it seems to me that there's a real big divide between the organizers and activists and actual party leadership. Because
Right.
if either way you look at it, the problem that they had was, in my opinion, was it's nice to have a lot of the leftist stars, especially the ones very popular in the media space, in terms of getting people to join, inspiring people to come into the party. But I feel like the big issue was is they didn't have those same activists and organizers in party leadership giving them advice on how it is to run a party, a state party, and how to run things more of a grassroots organizer type. Because we see even with the Democratic Party, the leadership versus the actual state parties are incredibly different. And just to segue
Right.
into this, just to talk more about the convention, what are some of the good things and the bad things about having those leftist stars in MPP? Did it create kind of like an unintentional divide between people who were inspired by the party versus those already
You
in?
know,
Can you
that's
tell
an
us more about
interesting
that?
question. That's an interesting question. I don't know if there's a real. So what I see now, this thing that people discuss is like a divide, right? The things that people complain about when you're talking about activism and who believes what side is right and what's left and what's right and all these things. To me, these are all like they're all outside constructs. They're all things that are happening outside of regular people that are reasons and excuses for regular people to not work together towards a shared goal, right? Like in the end, most people just want to survive, right? They don't want to go bankrupt because they get sick. They want to get normal health care on a regular basis. They want to get a real paycheck for going to work, every day. They want to live. They want to have a roof over their head. Like these are not like out of control crazy things that people want to have in their lives. And when you bring people who are popular into the sphere of these conversations, my question is always, but are they really affected by this, right? Like Susan Sarandon is not worrying about going broke, right? Like she's not concerned about, if she's gonna lose everything over the next couple of days because, somebody in her house gets sick. So not that you can't get support from someone who is of that standing, but it's something important to understand that gathering all these people who are high profile, who have a lot of money, um, who are basically able to write their own way because finances are not an issue, they're not what people are living with day to day, right? Like that's not the life that most people are living with day to day. And I would almost prefer to see people who are really talking about real things. Like I'm a real fan of Professor Richard Wolff, right? The economist. I feel like
I love him too.
he is
Yeah, we
real talk
love him.
all the way. That is who I like to listen to. And that's not to say anything against the people that they elicited to participate in these things, but I always question like where is that getting anybody as far as organizing goes, right? Like Justin Jackson, he's awesome. He's very smart. I watched the takedown. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
think he says some really good things. He does really good research, but you know, has he ever really organized anything? Has he gone out in his community and gathered people together towards getting something done in his community? I don't think he has, and that's not a slight against him. He hasn't had to, right? He's never been in that position where it's something that he needed to do. And so, you have to ask those questions like why is it that was the thing that was the most important and the most prevalent thing? Why was it so important to gather all of these people, to kind of jump on board and to support MPP without really thinking about the local level organizing and the ground floor things that really were going to be important if you're going to call yourself starting a party that's supposed to be about the people? Like, where are the people who are supposed to be doing this work?
Yeah, that's why a lot of people felt turned off, and there were a lot of people that had very strict, more socialist, working class, class focused ideology that felt like the People Party should have went more in that direction, but the People Party seemed they wanted to. They wanted to embrace more of these more popular people and just be more of a popular party, be more of an anti-establishment party instead of addressing the
Right.
grassroots. And that's why we had a lot of people that was pushing them on reparations. And I know I talked to some people that's close to them that said that's something they really want to get added and considered. But they can't blame people when they have reservations for the party when they are not like excited to jump on these things that are important to a lot of people on the left. So I'll turn it back over to RJ from there. I just want to add that because I know there's a lot of people that that was kind of turned off on the MVP because they just pushed them on a few issues, but there wasn't any way to hold leadership accountable. And so I definitely see what you were saying, Renee.
Right. And they, they're very, it's very much turned into, when we do the next convention and then we'll do bylaws and then we'll do our real platform and all of these things. And, there's been a real picking and choosing what they're going to speak up for, what things they're going to support. What I see is very like, what's the word? Like fake attempts at democracy, like these votes for things that they've already announced and said they were doing, to do a vote on an advisory council that you already have in existence, to me is a fake vote. To do a vote on whether or not you're going to support whole Washington is a fake vote. You've already announced a partnership. These are not ways to get people involved on the ground, because that stuff has to happen in communities. It has to happen, person to person. Jimmy Dore, like, yeah, he's funny, but Jimmy Dore is not going outside to talk to people and have like real conversations with people about doing anything. He's going to do it all from, his show and on YouTube. And, that's not how you understand what people need. That's not how you research the basis of the things that people want from their elected officials. You have to have those real conversations. And I don't see any of that happening.
Yeah, I
So
believe too there was more of a transparency issue. Like I've noticed too, like how can you as an activist and organizer to get people to join your party not really have your state party listed as an official party? Because then a potential voter, if they go to the Secretary of State and change their voter registration, how can you actually do that if it doesn't even exist on the party rolls? So like I think it makes it even more difficult to spread the message. And I feel like the transparency issue is pretty bad overall because you mentioned earlier, how can you create these different type of circles prematurely and then say you're going to vote on it to create it when it's already been created? So it kind
Right.
of
And that party access that's a real problem, because even in the places where MPP has stated, we're registered as a party, they're not registered as a party. They have started the registration process to become a party, but they still have to meet whatever qualification within the state is necessary before they will actually be a party. So like in California, yes, you can go onto the California registration website, you can select other, you can type People's Party in without the apostrophe, and you can say that you're signing up with the People's Party. But if they don't get 80,000 people to do that, they won't be a party. Like that's just not, it just won't happen.
yep.
And so, that question about being a state party and having a state actual like committee or, a state organization or something to that effect, that's really important. And it was one of the conversations we were having in New York. What kind of committee should we be trying to start? Should we be doing a ballot access committee? Should we be doing a committee where we would just support multiple candidates and then we would see what would happen locally, in different parts of the state? We had a young man who was participating in our weekly meetings who was thinking of running for a council seat. So we were talking about perhaps supporting him in his effort. And so, all of these things come into play, as you're going through this process and trying to become something viable, but you can't do that from a national standpoint. Like Nick in Virginia cannot make a decision about what people are going to vote for in Montana. What does he know? He doesn't live there. He has no idea what's going on in Montana. So you have to have people on the ground. And that's something that I feel like it all sounds good and they talk about it, but I don't know how much of it is actually getting done.
right. Nick, before we go on to talk about the Black Voter Circles and the leadership circle the MPP has, where all like the lefty stars are, do we have any questions in the chat?
Yeah, I have a question. This is my good friend DJ Elf. I actually talked to this guy. Um, it was a few weeks ago, and he had a lot of complaints about the People Party. But he was talking about how he was had a discussion with some candidates in the People Party, trying to push them on the issues like Julian Assange. The question DJ Elf had for Renee was, um, this is kind of the idea I was pushing out at the time, I voted for Howie Hawkins in the Green Party, not because I thought it was perfect, but we tried the concept of trying to taking over the Democratic Party, and that didn't work. But now, why not try to have that power, that power, and transform a third party who may be imperfect? So that's kind of what DJ's Elf question is getting to. He's saying, why not stay and fight within the MPP to change it? Why not take it over? And kind of bring it into the direction that we want it to go. If that's something that you consider, what is your overall strategy when it comes to mobilizing with the MVP or with the Green Party or any other third party?
So I voted Green multiple years. This year I actually ended up just writing in Bernie. But the issue with MPP, and Ed and I have talked many times over Twitter, so I know exactly who he is. The issue is that MPP as an entity is owned by Nick Mrena. Okay, he is the signatory on the documents that formed MPP. So he is the person who is behind People for Working Democracy. So to simply say, why not take it over? Why not, just do your own thing within? That sounds good, but how are you going to do that when legally the entity belongs to the person who is part of the problem?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I see
So you're
that.
saying it's kind of like the similar situation with both the Democratic and Republican Party. They're both corporate parties. They're both corporations. I mean, like the DNC said in court, we can pick whoever we want to. So, like, are you saying it's like a similar situation where Nick has a lot of power, where he can control the day-to-days and the inside power structure, and regardless if you, in good faith, want to go back and change the system to make it better, it'll be increasingly difficult due to how much power one person has. And I guess that goes to my next question: is was the power structure more vertical or horizontal? And what do you believe they could do next to make things better for the activists?
So, they really would need to completely deconstruct the leadership. It changed to the horizontal structure that they sold everybody on disappeared from the website. I think in like early December maybe, and part of the reason it disappeared was because people complained that everything says horizontal, but this does not feel horizontal. And then we were corrected in the Slack channel and told, well, no, we're not horizontal anymore. And the statements at that point were, okay, well, if it's not horizontal, why does the website still say that? And we were told it was an error and that they needed to change it. And I think it got switched that day. There has to be in all organizations, and I think this is something that I get a lot of slack for. Like, well, of course it has to be horizontal. Of course people have to, somebody has to be in charge. And yes, you do have to have people who ultimately are responsible for making sure that things happen, right? But there is a way to manage that people who are participating and giving their time and their energy and all of those things have a say in what those things ultimately are. So it's not to say that you can't have a leadership circle who, does the final, okay, this is how it's going to work. But the people who, if you have 1,000 people who are saying, we're here to help, we're here to do the work, we're here to do this, we're here to do that, then you should at least open these conversations and these decisions up to those 1,000 people so that they can have some say in what the next step is going to be. And that was where my issue came in with things that were happening was, we would get these announcements that, okay, this is what we're doing next. And then my question would be, okay, well, when did this happen? Like, when was this decision made? And why is it that I'm finding out after you made the announcement on Twitter? Like, why is it not something that, has been opened up for conversation and discussion, for everybody to participate and have some say before a final decision and before an announcement was made? And I feel like there are ways you don't have to, you can be horizontal and still have, a trusted body of people who are ultimately going to do, make the final announcement, the final say, the final here's how it's going to work. But it doesn't have to be something where those 8 or 9 people are sitting on a Zoom call together. It's not recorded. There are no notes. There's no way to know who said what, how the decision was made. Like, there's a way to do it so that it's transparent, so that people can at least be comfortable with the decisions that are made. And that's something that's absolutely missing from the organization that they have to fix. They cannot sit on a Zoom call together in this, this group of 8 or 9 people and make decisions that are not transparent, that are going to affect thousands of people who are supposed to be working on their behalf.
Right. So, and just to add on, like, how influential do you think that leadership circle was? Because that leadership circle was actually kind of created during and kind of after the controversies that have happened. A lot of it happened in the Slack channels, a lot of it happened over Twitter and social media. It was kind of created as a way to not only cover the mistakes, but make it seem like they're bringing in people in their eyes at their level of fame to fix a lot of these problems. One, do you feel like that worked in terms of fixing the issue to grab, experience, or did you feel that kind of hurt because it kind of furthered the divide even more? It made people feel like, okay, well, I have this smaller activist in my state who's very knowledgeable, but due to them not having this being friends, because I'm pretty sure a lot of them are friends, due to them not being friends with them, it's almost like a shutout. So what do you think about that?
I mean, I think that's probably fair. I don't know. I don't know what the credentials are for everyone who's part of that circle. I'm not utterly convinced that they're all the right person to be leading the working groups that they are charged with leading. Um, so, I have to ask the question: is it really the right person who's in charge of that? Is that who should be in charge of that particular work group? Um, does it make sense for that person to be like the guiding voice on this particular thing? And there's no way to know, because it's not public information. Like, there's, they give very little details about the members of the coordinating circle. You can get a little bit off of the website. There are a couple of people at last check who don't even have bios, so there's no way to know what their background is. And I think this is where having someone be elected to be leadership in a specific position would be a better choice than just saying, okay, this person is going to lead it because we trust this person to lead it. Well, trust them. Why? For what reason? What did they do, or what have they
Oh, you're muted.
what have they accomplished in order for them to actually, to have that title? And I don't know that that's the case with some of the people on that coordinating circle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so now we just finished having conversation about the convention. We finished having conversation about the party leadership. Now I actually want to transition to the focus group circles, or the working circles, they may call it in MPP. Now, this is something I believed initially was actually very good. You could have different groups of people based on sex, gender, ideology. Like, I know there's an LGBTQ worker circle, climate change, economy, teachers, and a black voter circle group, which I think are great, because you can have different people come in, talk about different issues they want to advocate for, and it could also potentially help the party and party leadership go about MPP overall, right? And so tell me your experience with not only the black voters group circle, and how your relationship was to them, and also explain how difficult overall was the black voters circle in connecting with party leadership.
So the Black Voters Circle was our leader, the person who coordinated the meetings and such, never wanted to actually be considered like the circle leader, which I thought was probably a really good way to do it, to just have us have conversation and to try and determine the best way for us to help the movement, right? So as I said, like when we first got started, this joke, this idea that Black people are monoliths. We all vote for Democrats, and that's just how it works. And it was, it was like astounding to people that Black people voted for Trump, because everybody is it's such a misconception that Black people have, like, we have one ideology politically, which is just not true. And when I joined the Black Voter Circle, my thought was that our role would be to help ensure that this party had people within it that were going to be a voice for Black people, right? So we were going to be able to look at the platform and have real conversations about how can the platform be adapted and adjusted in order to really reflect the needs of our people, right? When it comes to looking at leadership, how can we assist to make sure that there are leaders that are, going to be running for positions when it comes time for people to be running under the People's Party umbrella? Those were the type, looking at policy, looking at, reparations and criminal justice. Like, there's so many different places where those conversations could have led. And one of the things that kicked off a real issue was when we were asked as a circle to coordinate meeting with Puff Daddy's group. And, the ask was, can you schedule a meeting with Puff Daddy's group so that Nick and Tiffany can sit in on it with you? And we were like, well, why are we doing that? Like, one, what are we meeting with them to do exactly? And two, if we're meeting because as Black people, we're trying to coordinate and work with other organizations that are also supposed to represent Black people, why is Nick, who looks white, and Tiffany, who is definitely white, participating in that meeting? Like, what do they have to do with anything? And that got a little bit of pushback. There was pushback amongst a number of the circles because they were told, don't worry about policy, don't talk about policy, just worry about outreach and getting other members. And, so the question started to be, well, what exactly are these circles supposed to be doing? Like, what is the purpose? And it came to a real head because they released some documentation that called all the circles fan groups, and that did not go over well.
Wait, so
and that
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it just blew my mind for a second. So I understand you wanting to grow the party and bring people in, but the best way to do it is to have the voter circles with different ideologies, with different policies that you're for. That way, you meet someone that's like a teacher, that is LGBTQ, that is for climate change, that is for economics. Like the law of odds, if you get one person, that one person gets two, then four, then eight. So you could actually grow the party that way by actually talking about policy. But just by going
right,
out and saying, hey, come to this party that's brand new, people aren't going to be interested about it. You have to actually talk about policy
right,
to get people implemented into it. So that's what's
right,
shocking to me.
right. And again, there was no plan. Like, this all sounds good, but what exactly am I selling another organization on? What are they partnering with? What is it that they're going to join MPP and do in this partnership? Because there's no there's no actual plan in place for what's going to happen. And it all sounds good when you go on those national calls and Nick is going on about how bad the Dems are and how, there's the burning building and we're trying to give somebody a exit. But what's the plan? Like, how are you going to give somebody something else to do? And I still have yet to really hear anything that reflects that. They bring speakers on who at times do talk on those things, and they speak about like how to make the change and where the real activism is needed. But I haven't really heard a real plan from the organization as like a general, this is how we're going to change it. This is how we're going to break the duopoly. Because it can't just be about talking about, all right, Dems bad, Republicans bad. Dems bad, Republicans bad. Like, what are you going to do? Where are you going to do something to make a difference?
Right. Nick, do you have anything you want to add?
1 second.
Your phone is.
Yeah. One second, I was just muted. I was just looking at a lot of the discussion. It was just a few people sharing their experience with the People's Party and whether they're worth staying with. On I see once again, I think it was a good civil discussion. Most people just sharing their experience. I know DJ F was siding on the position of trying to fix MVP, lefty engineer. My friend Activists had concerns about oversight and accountability. So kind of mixed reaction on that, but we all acknowledge that we always have to ask better, and that's always been my position. I mean, I always been policy first more than anything, and how you actually going to help my community and why that's very important. So I think it's always best to ask for accountability. And when you have some people sharing their experience, I've seen some people in the comments that was saying that there was some volunteers that was getting discouraged because they didn't see the party going in the direction they wanted to. And the only thing you can do as a third party and as a leader is just kind of respond to those accusations and try to, in good faith, come to a reconciliation. But if a lot of those volunteers feel like they haven't been listened to, it'll lead to frustration. A lot of people kind of abandoning that. So that was mostly what I see the discussion was on, and I definitely can agree with that. In terms of my theory, I think we mostly always gotta focus on direct action, so we can have demands that we can set and put on people of power that favors the Black community and African American community. And when I saw the Green Party and the People Party, and when the People Party first got started, I'm I'm thinking like, okay, I'm not even mad that we have two leftist powers parties. So as long as they are able to engage with community and help us with direct action and mutual aid, I won't have an issue. But if you have members of the Black community that feel like they were being ignored, that's not a good thing. So that's kind of my take and kind of what I've been seeing the discussions on. I'll throw it back to you, RJ.
Yeah, so just to add on some stuff. So just for anyone that's confused, a lot of this stuff we just covered so far right now, all of this happened while still being inside MPP, while still having private conversations with party leadership, while still having conversations with each other along the MPP label. So I get to the next part I'm going to get to is I really want to talk about RNW because I believe that was an outside organization, not necessarily fighting to go at bat MPP, but just to try to tell MPP, hey, we care enough about these issues that we'll create an organization outside yours to try to get compromises. We'll be welcome to come back in, but the whole reason why we're creating this outside entity is because we believe in these so much. It's the same reason about third parties going against the two-party duopoly in America, like the Ross Perot did with the Reform Party, like the Green Party, what they're doing. So give us your experience with RNW, how that began, what was the goal, and why was that petition formed?
Okay. So RW, honestly, and I think this is something that I hear a lot that people just don't understand. The revolution within that name was just something they slapped on the Discord. There was no conversation. We weren't actually an entity. We weren't an organization. We weren't a group. You have to name the Discord something. So they named it Revolution Within. It was not ever meant to be another organization. It was where we had conversations about how we were going to navigate these changes that we were requesting to happen within MPP. It was always, for me, it was always about how we're going to work within the organization to make it better. All the meetings that we had when the petition was first presented, every meeting we had with Nick, every meeting we had with the CC, every meeting we had amongst ourselves to try and plan, it was always in an effort to get the things to happen that we were asking for within the petition. It was never about, we're going to start something new. And when people started to get frustrated enough that they were like, you know what, this is not going to happen. There were people who were firmly believed that the CC had no intention of really making the changes that were necessary in order for the organization to be the things that we wanted it to be. They left. They left MPP. They decided that they just couldn't do it anymore. And then conversations started about, you know what, maybe we should just do something new, just start a new organization. When those conversations happened, the next conversation was, okay, if that's what you all want to do, that's fine, but go do it somewhere else. because what we don't want to happen is for there to be any confusion about what it is that we're doing here on this Discord. And the purpose for this Discord is to get MPP to improve and to make those changes that have been requested within the petition to make the organization work better. And there was a vote, and they did. And they started Gilded, and they moved on, and they're still not an organization, and they still don't have a full plan, and they're still in the process of figuring out what they want to do. And so it was never about starting a new organization. It was always about trying to improve MPP. And I think that's why I was so offended, and I still get offended when I hear people say things like, oh, they were infiltrators, or when I hear people discuss the petition, people who signed the petition as people who didn't really do the work and who were just complaining. And, you know, this idea that like we were just complaining all the time and not really doing anything and causing a havoc and slack and so forth and so on, when none of that really was an accurate reflection of the people who were trying to do the work to make the changes within MPP. So I think from the outside, you know, I hear that a lot, like, oh, well, they were just dissatisfied and they weren't happy and this, that, and the other thing. But the things I wasn't happy with are things that should be fixed. You should be transparent. I should be able to go onto your website and see your financial documentation without having to search the IRS. I should know who all of your leadership are. I should be able to read notes from, you know, your closed meetings within the central coordinating circle where you make decisions. There should be something in place where if people have a legitimate concern or a problem that happens within your workspace, there should be some way to fix it and to address it. Like, these are not crazy things. These are things that should have been in place, frankly, before they did that entire spectacle that they put on when they did their convention. Like, to me, this was their fault for not having these things in place. And I had conversations directly with Nick. I spoke to him directly. I had meetings with him, and I told him, you are worrying a whole lot about, you know, the Democrats and infiltrators and all these things. And the stuff that you need to fix, you are not focused on. And you're never going to make it if you don't fix those things, because those things are important. Those are the things you need to worry about. And he said, okay, but I don't think anything ever really got done, to be honest. So,
Yeah. I think that's very interesting because based on what we've seen, like I didn't realize that there would be a smear campaign by some people. I'm not necessarily saying leadership or MPP in general, but some people who may be deeply affiliated with it would smear those who will come out and say they have problems. Because if you do have problems and there's someone who's showing a signal, you would think you would fix those easily, you know. And just
right,
about, and thank you for clearing up R&W, because it was like, because the way people perceive it isn't always the truth. So I would like to thank you for
right,
actually coming out and saying what it was actually meant to do. It was actually it was not really an organization, but it was a group of people. It was an idea where it was inside MPP. It's like, okay, here are some problems with MPP. Here's some solutions you can make. Let's work together to do it. It wasn't some outside infiltrator. It wasn't some people trying to corrupt the party and destroy the party. It was just some people who are deeply concerned about certain issues that they wanted to fix with the party. That way they could bring it to their state and bring it to their families, friends, and different other people to help it grow. And
right. And the
I,
point of the petition, just very quickly, people, and this is something that I don't think people also understand, is that people who spoke up were disappeared. So just like I woke up one morning and did not have my access anymore, that was not the first time that happened based on decisions that leadership made. And what people were finding was, if you were a voice of discontent and if you were a person who spoke up about concerns, you eventually were just removed from MPP. So the thought process was, maybe if there's a group of people all with similar concerns, since all of the concerns seem to be the same, and we all come to the table and say, listen, there's 50 of us who are saying this is a problem, and we're all hub coordinators, state coordinators, regional coordinators, circle heads, working group people. Like, maybe they'll listen and recognize that this is not like one or two people complaining. This is a group of people bringing legitimate concerns to your organization that need to be addressed. And at the time when we initially presented the petition, there was 100 people who had signed it. That's a lot of people saying the same thing. So, this idea that like it was like this small group of malcontents, in order to participate in that discord, you had to sign the petition. The whole purpose was to have a space where we could discuss the things that were happening with MPP with regard to the petition and how we saw things moving along with, trying to get these changes made.
Yeah, and just to clear some stuff up for people who are confused about actual participating total. So just because you signed up for a Slack or a Discord doesn't necessarily mean those very same number of people are there are actually participating in the party. Because like for instance, if you are on like a Discord channel with like a state coordinator with a group circle, there's a potential chance you could have at least 50 to 60% less people in that actual meeting versus the total amount of people inside that Discord chat. So I think that's what was very concerning too. Is why is it there's so many people in these Slack channels and so many people that have joined, but how come they're not, I wouldn't say participating, but how come they're not inspired enough to want to participate and be a part of these chats? Because that's what's deeply concerning. And for people who are in these state coordinator positions, yes, they're very happy to be have some part of leadership for the party, but it can be disconcerting at a time because you're putting all this work in to outreach people to get them to the party. But if you can't keep them there when you get them, then it makes it difficult to organize and to have people with you to get even more people to keep everything afloat. So that's just
Right.
kind of my
And
concern.
and that was a really hard, this was a hard conversation to have. And we circled back to this every week on our New York calls, which was, is this the time to start reaching out to the 7,000 people who are waiting in Action Network? And what are we reaching out to say? We expanded the state Slack for New York simply by going to the people who signed up for national, who were in the national Slack and saying, okay, hey, you're already in Slack. Would you be interested in participating in the weekly New York meetings? And, we grew to a fairly good number of people in the New York. When that New York hub was created, there were two people in there, me and the person who created it. And when I got booted, there were 51 people in there. Like, we had done some real work to expand, but what I got a lot was, okay, this is great. These meetings are great, but what are we doing? And that's a hard question to answer because there was no plan. And so, it's difficult. Like, things are really hard and people have legitimate concerns, and there are so many things that need to be changed and fixed and fought for, and it's overwhelming. Like, when I look around at all the stuff that, like, I watched that conspiracy documentary and I was like, oh my Lord, like, now it's, now it's not just the straws. Like, there's so many things that are wrong. And I don't want to waste my time, and no one wants to waste their time doing something that's not going to help, right? Like, when you sign up for an organization and you agree to participate in the work to organize something, you want your work to mean something, right? You want it to do something. My husband is very like active in the community. He volunteers with a group. He does like, the food kitchen on weekends, like, and because of COVID, I haven't really been able to do very many like outside activities because I'm compromised. But, to me, what he's doing is doing way more for New York than anything that we were able to do in the New York hub, simply because we didn't have an agenda. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have anything that was really, going to move anything in any particular way. And we were floating, and it just didn't make any sense.
Right. I think it's pretty difficult too, because like I know like the different regional coordinators, depending on your state and what part you are for the country. Some states, it's millions of people in that state. So to have two people designated for one state is incredibly difficult because you could have two regional coordinators within like the same 20-mile proximity, but the rest of the state is miles and miles long. And it really makes it difficult for really the coordinators to actually reach out and to get more people because of how big a certain state is. And Nick, I saw you unmuted yourself. Did you have anything you wanted to add to the conversation so far? Oh, you're still muted, by the way.
Let me unmute myself for the show. I saw that there was just a little bit of discussion, and to the point of fighting the MPP, they also bring up that the problem is that a lot of the policy decision making is pretty much concentrated on the very, very top. So that could be make it very hard to push a party. Now we back in position we was when it comes fighting the corporate parties. Because when we fight the corporate parties, the problem is that we don't have much influence on the top. So we can't have another situation where we just start a new organization and then that organization grows and we end up with that same exact problem. That can't be what we are doing. Cause we can't just go for a full circle, or we just gonna waste a ton of time. And I know there was also a lot of fanfare for the dog in the back, Renee. What type of dog is that?
Oh, you're muted,
Yeah,
Renee.
you're
You're
muted.
you're muted.
Sorry, he's actually, they're trying to hold him back down there. He is a part pit bull, part plot hound. We think he's a breed. We don't fully know, but he is
Yeah,
pretty. I won't lie, he's
yeah,
pretty.
yeah. I know
He's fun. He's a good dog.
our audience are enthusiasts of dogs, so they saw that, so they was pretty excited about that. But anyway, I toss it back to I'll toss it back to RJ.
Okay, so there's two more segments I want to get to before we let you go. It's been great having you so far for 50 minutes. A great discussion. The two segments I want to talk to you about is censorship, and the next one I'll talk to you about is what project or whatever you're working on now that you want to do for your community. So for the first part, I want to get into is tell us about MPP's censorship and the removal of activists from its Slack and party. Is it something that was arbitrarily done by party leadership, or is it something that was written in the party bylaws that say if you do this, everyone has agreed on that you will be removed? So tell us about the process of that, and tell us if you have an experience being removed, or if anyone else has an experience of being removed.
So, one, there are no party bylaws still, which to me is a huge problem, but there are no bylaws. They claim they will be voted on at the party convention in the fall. We'll see if that actually happens. There is a written document of, like organizational rules and structure that states that there's supposed to be a process before you remove someone from the organization unless it's egregious. I don't know what qualifies as egregious versus not qualifies as egregious. It's something that they decide as a leadership team on their Zoom calls. I was arbitrarily removed. There was a number of issues that occurred, including what they called some kind of a hack for a vote, and they thought the data was being compromised. So they went through and they removed, I believe it was 25 people in one night.
Wait, so they thought the
So
voting was compromised?
they did a vote, which was another one of these non-vote things. They voted on if they should be moving from Slack to Gilded. As an organization, the decision had already been made, to my understanding, that they were going to move to Gilded, but they agreed to do a vote so that people would feel like they were voting on something.
Jesus.
When the vote, yeah, just shake your head and laugh because it's really, when the vote happened, supposedly there were a number of attempts to, place fake votes, and they were used with people's real names and information, supposedly. I don't know that there was ever any real verification of what actually happened, but they used this as their reasoning for booting people out. They called it an abundance of caution. I was one of the people that was removed that night. The reason that I know that it was really not what they claimed it to be was because 100% fact, one person was removed who had been in the organization for about 2 weeks. She had
Wow.
signed the petition. She was not party to anything that was going on with the petition, or with any outside actions that were happening. She was removed when she had the meeting. She was told that her questions were too much like the questions that the people who signed the petition had asked. So apparently she seemed too much like an infiltrator.
So you're
I
saying she
was
was a
removed.
Russian? Is that what you're saying?
Right, right, right. She was a bot. And there were a number of people who were removed from the Black Voters Group who had been in a conversation the night before with a group of white people regarding use of the N-word and whether or not that was appropriate for white people. That conversation, if I remember, I wasn't involved in it, but if I remember the details properly, there were 4 or 5 white people involved. 1 white person was removed. There were 4 Black people involved and 1 white person defending the Black people. All 5 of us, all 5 of us were removed. So it was very, it was a
So there
false,
was a
it was, the whole
discussion
thing was
about.
falsely fulfilled.
So I just want to clarify. There was a discussion about whether white people can use the N word or not, and
Yep.
this was actually a thing that actually drew any tension in anyone's time. Like, was that actually a serious discussion?
They were
That says a
fighting
lot.
hard.
That says a lot. Go
It
ahead,
says it
Renee.
does. It really does. And when I talked to Nick after I was removed, and I said to him, I said, how many people did you all boot out? And he told me 25. And I said, are you aware that 7 of those 25 people were Black and 4 of those 7 people were involved in a conversation in which white people thought the N-word was appropriate for them to use? And he told me, well, race didn't have anything to do with it. And I said, yeah, but you didn't come to anybody's rescue either. There were a lot of conversations within that Slack workspace where Black people were really uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable. There were conversations that were being had about, teaming up with the right, and I know everybody has different, thoughts on whether or not you should, meet with alt-right people and work with them and all these things. But I feel like as a Black person, your experience in that is one that if I say to you as a Black person, I'm not comfortable reaching out to the dude in the Hawaiian shirt holding a gun, like, it's okay for me to feel that way, right? Like, I'm okay to feel that. And if you're brave enough to go do that as a Black person, like, go for it. But, like, I'm not doing it. And so I shouldn't feel attacked by that, right? If I tell you I am uncomfortable with you using the N-word because you heard it in a song, like, just don't use it around me, because I'm telling you it makes me uncomfortable. And why should I have to be uncomfortable? So for the reaction to that to be, well, wait, there's not an N-word pass? Like, how is this conversation happening right now? And, Black people getting made fun of in the Slack and having, and not just by,
Can you dive
like,
deep into
the
that?
leadership. Dive deep into what?
You said Black people were being made fun of in the Slack. Can you explain that further?
So what I found happening a lot is, as a Black person, if you had the audacity to speak your mind on something, and it was something that a white person didn't necessarily agree with, they were very quick to tell you that you complain too much, that you always have something to say, that, like this attitude as if you don't have the right to speak on something that is a valid point for you, right? And that was a problem.
And they don't even realize
Thomas
that's the
Royko,
same thing. Sorry to interrupt you, Renee, but they don't even understand that's
no, it's okay.
they don't even understand that's the same problem that we have with white liberals. And I actually discussed this with a lot of Black leftists, and that's why we have our show here at the Fred Hampton Leftists, because I think a lot of people need to start listening to not even just Black leftists, but people of color in general that's on the left sphere, instead of just elevating and propping up white culture on the left. Because someone brings up in the chat here, and I actually remember seeing that on Twitter, there was a 500 reply thread. And I remember in that thread, there was a ton of Black leftists that are mutuals with me who was saying, no, hell no, don't use the N-word. And then if you see the people who were defending it, it was a ton of white people telling people of color that nah, man, you guys gotta chill. Like, are you guys serious right now? Are you guys actually conservatives or like this is kind of stuff you expect out of MAGA? But it's literally people who call themselves allies who are like, oh man, you guys gotta relax and we're not that big of a deal. Meanwhile, you guys think your opinion. This is the arrogance and the ego that they have. They actually believe that their opinion weighs more than the people of color literally telling them, don't do it. Like, just don't do it. It's
Right.
just that
And
simple.
my and I'm not, listen, I try my best not to be a person who tells other people what to do because everybody has to make the decision about what makes them comfortable. Me as a black person, I don't like the N-word. I don't use it. I went through my phase. I'm old. I went through my phase in the 90s because that was the music. And yeah, and at the time I didn't see a big problem. I will admit it. But now, after having gone to some of the places that I've gone to see and understanding some of the history, and after honestly seeing pictures of that word carved into bodies hanging from trees, I don't want to hear it, right? I don't want to hear it. I
Yeah,
don't want to read it. I don't want to talk about it. Like,
I
I don't
agree
want
with
to be
you on
part of it.
that.
I
And
I don't think it's something that people should use. Period. And I check black people. Like RJ saw it. Like I was like, can we do me a
I knew she
favor?
can. I
Can
knew
we
you were gonna
not
say
do that,
that.
please?
I
Right. And but everybody has to do what makes them comfortable. But if me as a black person, I'm telling you the N word makes me uncomfortable, then I think out of respect, don't use it around me because I've
yeah.
told you that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I think that's a respectable position. And I actually told this is the arrogance and why these people are not our friends or our allies because there are these white progressives and these white people that are arguing that they can say the N word. They don't understand that there's even people in the black community who don't like it. And I'll be honest with you guys right now. I say it every once in a while, but just like Renee, I'm very similar with Renee. Where I said it way, way more when I was a teenager. I don't say it as much as now. When do I say it? I only say it when I'm really around close friends. I mean, my brothers. Like when I might drop it casually around them, but I honestly don't ever say that. Like when I'm in public, when I'm working with people, when I'm around black people that I'm even just casual with, I don't say it around them. To me, it just don't feel right because the whole point of it is you calling someone your brother when you're just saying it and saying it. I think it just sounds stupid. That's probably just me being personal, but
Yeah.
I do say it, but I only say it around like people who I knew for like 15, 20 years who knew me since like high school or some people were really close friends. If you're someone who's saying that around people who you're not sure are comfortable with that, I think you're in the wrong. Now, with me saying that, this is me saying that as a black man. Imagine the audacity of now consider our position. Now consider the audacity of a white person who think they can say it to a black person who's not comfortable with it. Me, a black person, I said I'm willing not to say it to a black person who's not comfortable with it. But you, a white person, think you're above that. I just want people to understand how ridiculous that is.
Right.
Right.
And it got to where, the white person who, and I don't think Steve will mind me saying his name. Love Steve. He gets all my orange hearts. When he spoke up and he was like, this is ridiculous. You all need to stop. They started calling him a class traitor. Like it was so bad that
Are you
yes.
serious
So,
right now?
so yes, yes. And this was the thing. Like they were so adamant about why they should be okay to use the N word that they attacked the white person who was saying you really shouldn't use that word. That's not okay. And he also got the boot. Just for clarity.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I do want to kind of continue like the censorship portion because this is a good conversation. Based on my experience, hearing from other, people from MPP, they've also experienced censorship in the terms of the Slack. So if you want to have like a certain good-hearted debate, or like if you have problems with MPP in general, people would publicly in this Slack express their conversation because we all know everyone can see it, and certain people in party leadership can see it. And what would happen a lot of times is they would go in, make their piece respectively in the comment section in Slack, and then when they go back an hour later, their messages are gone. So why is someone arbitrarily deleting Slack messages that someone has said? And why aren't if and there's an argument to be made if there were rules in the bylaws, which there aren't, you could then have an excuse to say why you could delete comments. That's also very concerning because even if you don't like what someone says, at least it's on the public record. So when you have a conversation or a meeting, you can discuss about something, think some things that were said that were bad or things that were good. So, and based on my experience too, like I remember I was on a call. It was one with the Thomas Frank interview. I was very excited about that. And someone made something derogatory in the comments. I'm not saying that was a good thing. I'm saying that was bad. But instead of saying, "Hey, this is why you're wrong in this issue," and correcting the issue, they just they just turned off the chat channel in general. So what? Okay, so my question to you would be is, what are some of the problems you believe are in these Slack channels and these social media channels in which leadership abuses their power, and how do you believe they can fix that in general to make it more effective?
So it's tricky because whenever you open up your organization to have these open channels of communication between volunteers, right? Like this is kind of part of the thing, right? Like this is bound to happen. There are bound to be people who make inappropriate comments. There's bound to be disagreement. And if you are going to open your organization up to have this type of communication be available, then you also have to be willing to take responsibility for policing that thing, right? Like you should be in your Slack monitoring what's happening. And when people are tagging the entire coordinating circle asking for help, someone should be responding. And that was part of the reason that in the petition, we were requesting the regenerative culture circle to be reinstituted as a working group to make sure that there was a group of people working to monitor the Slack, to help when these things happen, to have these conversations and to investigate when some offense happened, right? Um, so you have a choice as an organization. You can not have this thing be a part of your organization because you don't have to have Slack, right? You don't have to have Discord. You don't have to have Gilded. You could do all your work through, something like a base camp where people can send notices out, they can communicate, but you can't have this free flow of, communication between people that's unmonitored. So you either have to do that, don't allow it at all, or you have to take the responsibility of your volunteer community and make sure that people feel safe in those spaces, because that's important if you're going to allow that to happen.
Right. And another concerning thing I saw was even if, let's say, you go through the route of you meet with MPP leadership or you express your concerns with a group of your fellow MPP people, you go to your regional coordinators. But then when you actually want to make your concerns public, because a lot of times if you do that for an organization where, hey, I'm factually speaking about something publicly, so explain why on Twitter a couple of times, even the MPP actual Twitter site was catching the block on some folks. And why is it that some particular people, especially in party leadership, were also blocking folks when they want to express even more? Hey, remember the things you promised you would change? What's up with that? Why aren't you doing that? And they're just blocking people. So what's your opinion on that?
Um, I mean, honestly, blocking someone to me is, I've blocked like 3 people in the year that I've been on Twitter, and it's because someone's so outrageous with the things that they're posting on like my threads that I just can't, like somebody was trying to convince me I wasn't black. So I was like, okay, I'm not having this argument with this person anymore. I'm just going to block them because this is outrageous now. And,
Oh my
but
gosh.
to block people because you don't want to hear criticism, to me, is the ultimate cowardice, right? Because if you're right, then you can just respond, right? You have the right to speak on something if you believe that you're right in what you're saying, right? Like I try my best whenever I post anything. If I'm saying this is what happened to me, then I post it with something that proves that thing actually happened. I have nothing to hide. I don't have anything to squirrel away. I'm not secretive about anything. It is what it is. What happened, happened. I have my receipts. And to date, no one that I've ever said, show me proof that I broke the community agreement. Show me proof that I did something in Slack that was inappropriate. Show me proof that I did some kind of data hack. Like, prove it. prove everything that you're saying about me, and there's been nothing. It's crickets, because there is no proof, because I didn't do it, right? And so to me, the fact that like Nick blocked me and Annalise blocked me and all these people is because they don't want to hear the truth. Like, that's not my problem. I can't, I can only speak what I know. And if you're a person of integrity, then you don't have a problem with that. You'll just respond. And if you think I'm not telling the truth, then you'll respond with something that proves that I'm not telling the truth. And so if you block me instead of doing that, that just means that I'm telling the truth and you don't want to deal with it. And I can't really fight that battle. That's not for me to fight.
Right. This has been a great conversation so far. My last question for this segment overall is, do you feel like you could go back to MPP? And overall, what changes do you believe MPP could make to improve their relations with their organizers? And what changes overall could they make to be a better party? And the reason why I asked that question is because it's 2021. The party itself wants to have people on the ballot by the time of 2022 and have a presidential candidate in 2024. So when you have all these structural issues, it makes it harder to go against, I don't know, the Democratic Party, who is this big juggernaut, well-moneyed machine that you're going against. I mean, they're going to squish you like a bug. So what do you believe the changes need to be made for MPP to be the party they want to be and to be successful in the future?
That's a tough question, because that leadership has to change. And as I said earlier, like, the leadership owns it, right? So I don't know. I don't have any faith that they can be a viable party in 22, nor do I have any faith that they can run somebody for president in 2024, because it's April 2021. And most people who are running for 2022 have already started to announce their candidacy, and they're just about to start their process of looking for candidates, not like selecting, looking for candidates. And so I find it hard to believe that they're really going to be able to do anything that they've set forward. And, let's not forget that when they first announced and started to do things in 2018, they were supposed to have full ballot access in all 50 states by the end of 2020. So essentially what has happened...
They actually said?
Oh, yeah, there's a whole thing of what their plan was and how they were going to make this happen. And the original, thing that they promised was that they were going to have ballot access in all 50 states by the end of 2020.
And how many do they have
by the
now?
end of 2020?
And how many states do they? Oh, 0. Wow. Okay. Because
They've started the process in 3 places, but they do not actually have ballot access yet in any of those 3 states.
Yeah, I have a comment from Ben who was saying, I think he was talking about the ballot access. I'm trying to see if I'm going to clarify. But he's saying the state house reps cost $500,000. The house costs $2 million. I think he's referring to ballot access. Do you guys know what he's talking about? I think that, because I know the biggest problem, and I was just about to bring this up, and this may not even 100% be a reflection on the People's Party, because there is a push by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party to push these parties off the ballot and restrict third-party access, not only by for campaign staff and advertising, that what Ben said, but they are actually increasing the requirements and the amount of money and the amount of senators required to get on the ballot. So that's going to be something that the People Party had to overcome with all the structural problems that you guys are kind of outlining here now.
The money thing is, running a candidate is very, very expensive, okay? Getting ballot access, depending on the state that you're in, is not necessarily expensive, because it depends on what the state requires to have ballot access. So in a state where you have to have 5,000 signups in your state registered for a particular party in order for it to be valid, right? Then that just takes people on the ground, going out, getting signatures, so forth and so on. In a place like New York, where you have to actively run a candidate and that candidate has to get a certain amount of the votes, it is a very expensive process because you have to actually run a campaign, and campaigns are expensive. You know, this idea that to run for one of these seats, and I think that's what this person was referring to, you're looking at, and he's right, $2 million is cheap to run a senatorial race. Like that's low.
Yeah, he's saying it's
It
for each
depends
cycle
on where
too.
you are.
That's crazy once it's for each
Right.
cycle, but go ahead.
Right. So it is, and that is each cycle. Every time that's why so many of, when people start running, and it's the unfortunate part of politics that money is something that factors in so greatly into our politics because it shouldn't. And that's why policy and government is all jacked up, because money is where everything comes from. Like, money is part of the problem. If money wasn't such a big deal, more things would get done for people. The reason nothing gets done for people is because it's all about your donors, and your bigger donors are your corporations, big pharma, millionaires, billionaires. These are the people who get the word in government because they are the people who are able to donate the most amount of money. And so you find that once somebody gets into their seat, they are immediately asking for money again. Like, I just saw an ad for Warnock, and he's like, donate. And I was like, you just got there. But the first thing they tell you when you get into your office is, okay, who are you going to start calling to raise money, to bring more money in for your seat? And it is all about the money. These campaigns are expensive. They're really expensive. And that's something that I didn't speak on, but not for nothing. MPP raised like $150,000, I think, in 2020. Who are you running for $150,000? Like, you can't run any campaign on $150,000, much less a multi-state Congress campaign in different places. Like, I don't even know how that would be possible, because it is such an expensive thing to run, because it's all about ads and these mailers and commercials and all these things, and it really is unfortunate, because in the end, none of that does anything for the people that you're supposed to be representing, and that's why it's such a it's a mess. But those numbers are probably right that person quoted for a cycle. Yep.
Yeah, and they were saying this is why the Democratic Party likes AOC, because she's such a fundraising juggernaut. I mean, she was breaking. She was like the highest funding congressional politician to have re-election. I'll double check that.
Right.
But if I remember right, I think they were saying she was like number one. And that's as you were saying, Renee. That's why money is so important. That's why they would love to have someone like that on their side. But go ahead, RJ.
Yeah, I was going to say too, just to add on to your point about why it's so expensive. Most people don't realize that for people who run in the House, you have a 6-month window until you can actually give a fuck, basically, and then after that, you have to start raising money. That's called once July, once they go on recess for Congress. That's when they say, hey, you got to start caring about running for re-election again. Why do you think all these Republicans telling Joe Biden, hey, give us 9 months after Trump leaves, then we'll be on board for you? But by the time that 9 months ends, that's when the legislative cycle ends, and that's when you start fundraising for 2022. And one of the big issues I saw and that I'm glad you brought up the money issue, because you do need money to run a campaign. Let's not be naive here. So the problem with that is if you're not going to take corporate PAC money, if you're not going to take big money from all these different industries, you're basically relying on money from the people who are organizing and being activists who work with you, and you're also relying on the money from those potential voters in those areas that become part of your party and will vote for you. So if you're screwing up with the organizers and the activists, you're hurting your money line. And the difference between AOC is that she's a national figure now. I'm pretty sure if you ask any person, they don't know what the FMPP is. The only people who know are basically those who are online or those who are specifically on the left. And just to get to Nick's point about AOC, the reason why the establishment kind of likes AOC now is because AOC is very good at towing the establishment line. She's not necessarily going to upset their apple cart. And what AOC does by raising so much money, she gives it to her she can give it to other progressives, she can give it to other organizations, which is great. But the thing is, it actually saves the Democratic Party money, because if I have 15 other progressives who don't take PAC money and don't need my money, that's 15 to 25 less progressives I got to worry about to give money to. So if I'm the establishment of Democrats and I'm struggling getting Democrats in office, that's a whole lot less money I got to worry about fundraising for. I can just keep my core constituency going. The progressives, they're going to run the party line right with me. I don't have to worry about them, and we can keep the gravy train running. So that was just my quick wrap up of everything we talked about so far. And I guess that brings us to our final segment of is there any new project you're working on? I kind of wanted to end on a happier note because we've been kind of dragging
Yeah.
MPP for like an hour. So is there anything specifically
I
you're
know.
working on to improve your community?
Yeah. So I actually started meeting with the Socialist Alternative because I'm interested to see, what they're doing. And they're, I'm a full supporter of unions and working people being being the voice of corporations. I think co-ops are an amazing thing that should be happening everywhere. And I don't know 100% that this will be my route, but it is something that I've looked at. Um, I have someone else who I met through MPP, funny enough, who we were so disgruntled by our experience that we decided to try and start a nonprofit. So we've started doing that work to try and get something started. And the goal of that nonprofit is to help create safe spaces for volunteers in nonprofit organizations and, to work through some of these issues to make sure that when people sign up to give their time and their effort within an organization, that they don't feel the way I felt, going through that process with MPP. And then also, as you know, RJ, we've been working and having a lot of conversations with those of us from the Black Voters Circle who either left or were removed from MPP to try and see, how we can work together to work in our communities and try and do something with research or think tanks or community organizing to try and, find a way to work within the Black community to have a voice. So I'm a little bit all over the place, to be honest, but, I think in the end, you have to do this. You have to kind of go about things in multiple ways to see what the best step is going to be going forward to make something happen. And there's also a large group of people who left MPP and who were booted out who are still going to try and start a new organization. And I'm watching and helping and seeing where that goes. And in the end, I really want to participate in something where my actions are going to change a local community, where when I'm looking around at what I'm doing, it's actually served a purpose. And I'm really intent on not bringing the community an idea that I think is going to work, but going into a community and having those real conversations and saying, what do you need? What is it that's needed in this neighborhood, in this city, in this zip code, whatever it is, that's going to give you a resource that's going to allow the community to thrive and to do better and to be able to sustain on something that's not reliant on the government, because you can't rely on the government for everything. And how do you make that happen within a community so that when you leave, you've left them with something that they can continue to use as a resource and that they continue to use to thrive. That to me is what's important. That's where the work's got to be.
Yeah, and as I've grown as a leftist in general, like you know me, I used to be all in on the electoral politics. You guys, everyone here knows my story from how I transitioned to the left. I was like, okay, electoral politics, get into government, this is the way to go. And me over time, I'm a little bit more divested in electoral politics in terms of not only activating for it, but in general, like I'm more in for grassroots organizing and being activists and creating these organizations to help regular working people. I believe that's actually the best path moving forward. And if you look historically, the Socialist Party of America in the 1920s, you look at the Labor Party, look at the Communist Party of 1930s and 40s, they created grassroots movements with a mutual aid and with direct action to get what they want. So that's actually that rich winning history that leftists should use to actually gain not only power in their own states, but nationally. In fact, they were so threatened, they were forced to make compromises with us.
Yeah,
So I
my
believe that's actually the best path to move forward. What do you want to say next?
Yeah, there was a good comment by Comrade Margot who been leaving some good comments today. We appreciate you watching. She was saying ranked choice voting is more important than starting a new party as a whole. And I remember Renee mentioned that as well. And anyone who followed my work know how I think that is important as well. I'm on the board of National Ranked Choice Voting, and I think when it comes to electoral politics versus direct action, I think the left needs to be strategic because we are not like the neoliberals, we are not like the Republicans, where we have unlimited corporate funds. So you have to ask yourself, is it more worthwhile for you to donate a small amount of money you have towards mutual aid and helping a neighbor and a community out in need, or is it for donating to a campaign? And that's why I'm pretty hard on progressives because if you're gonna run right now this climate, you gotta better have a goddamn good pitch and be willing to fight for our community as hard as possible. Because at this point, you are asking for people to donate their money to your campaign instead of to other causes. Now, I also bring up ranked choice voting because it's important. Because if you're going to focus on electoral politics, there are a lot of people who's enthusiastic about the MPP, and the reason why I joined the board of national ranked choice voting because I'm a strong advocate of showing two party duopoly. But let's be serious. If you have any um, if you have any sympathy towards electoral politics and that strategy, and you're not advocating for ranked choice voting, you're not being a serious person. Like, I mean, if you're gonna advocate for electoral politics, that has to be your first step. So that's why when it comes to electoral politics, that's my main focus. Direct ballot initiatives, another important thing. That's how you get ranked choice voting. That's how you do stuff in red states. Like I'm in Missouri, a red state, but we voted to expand Medicare. We voted to get medical marijuana. So when it comes to leftist strategies, direct ballot initiative, mutual aid, make sure that's an important part. And if you do electoral politics, I really do think you should focus on ranked choice voting if you want to do that. That's my contact on that. I'll toss it to RJ. See you guys got anything you guys want to finish up on.
And I'm gonna have to wrap here soon.
Yeah,
My family,
Right.
my poor family.
yeah. We about an hour and a half
Are
in
you
it
done yet?
usually. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, last thing I will say is that I hope the beautiful thing out of this is those who felt like they were wronged by MPP or just left in general. I hope they take your route, Renee, of hey, let's actually create organizations for my community. Let's do things like that helps better our community instead of investing in electoral politics, which I think is a great thing because not only like you even mentioned, hey, I went through a bad situation with MPP, but the very same people I was working with, we ended up working together on something outside of it for our community. So I think that's perfect, and I think that's what's great. And those are my final thoughts. Any final thoughts for you?
I agree. I think in the end, you know, any situation you can find something positive to come from it, and I really just urge people. This is not about destroying MPP. This is not about tearing them down. This is about making sure that when you get yourself involved in an organization, you are clear about what that organization is, what they are doing, who is running it, what their purpose is, and that they're actually following that purpose. And sometimes, it's about finding your own path and figuring out the best way to get things done. And I can't stress it more, like more and more and more. It has to be about local action. It has to be about what's going on in the community. It has to be about fixing the things around you because that's the only way to get it started.
well
Right.
said.
Nick,
Well
final
said.
thoughts?
Well said. I don't have much to add here at the end. I appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you, Renee, for coming on. Everyone in the chat enjoyed what you had to add to the discussion here today. It's important to subscribe and hit the bell because everyone in my circle know what they've been doing in terms of independent leftist media. I mean, YouTube is very hard to start an independent network channel. So if you enjoy this conversation, not only should you subscribe, hit the bell so you actually can see our videos. It's very important for us to help it grow. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you once again for joining on, Renee. Check out our shot. I believe Rome will have some content for tomorrow if I remember. But
Right.
we are on an active schedule. We're on a network, so we're gonna be hitting you guys with content every day. So thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you, Renee. Anything you want to say before
Thank
you
you. Thanks for
finish,
having me on.
RJ?
I would like to tell Renee, thank you very much. We've been friends for a while. I feel like I was very objective, but because I know some people say, oh, well, if you know this person, I can be objective. I feel like I gave her fair questions, challenged when needed, and just gave up good follow up. So it's great having you on to discuss MPP about what you're doing in the future, and I enjoyed this conversation.
I did as
Oh,
well.
and
Thanks,
make
RJ. It
sure
was nice to meet you, Nick.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Oh, and make sure too, if you like our show and if you like any of our shows for FHO Network, make sure to go to our Patreon. Any donations you can give is great. It helps us out with our production. It helps for any extra expenses we can to give you great content. And I believe we'll be on Rockfin soon. That'll be starting next week, just in case YouTube decides to give us the boot. So that would be great. Follow us on Twitter at Fred Hampton Leftist, Fred Hampton Left. We'll be on Instagram as well, Fred Hampton Leftist. That's basically everything. And thank you for watching.
Yeah, I'm gonna put the Patreon in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. Fred Hampton Leftists. We're signing out. Peace out.
Take care.